My name is Aaliyah. I am 32 years old, and I work in a corporate office as a full-time employee. From the outside, my life looks normal and successful, but behind closed doors, I was living in fear. This is not just a story I heard, this is my story, and today I am finally brave enough to tell it. The clock on the office wall showed exactly 5 o'clock. One by one, people began to shut down their computers, slide chairs back, and grab their bags. The room slowly filled with light voices and tired laughter. Some talked about dinner plans, some joked about traffic, others complained softly about another long day. Smiles appeared on faces that had been tense only minutes before. Everyone wanted to go home. Everyone except me. I stayed seated at my desk, my hands resting in my lap, my computer already turned off. The black screen reflected my face faintly, like a shadow of the woman I had become. I did not move. I did not want to leave. The office grew quieter as footsteps faded toward the elevators. The cold air hummed softly from the vents. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared at the empty rows of desks. The silence felt heavy, but it was still kinder than what waited for me outside these walls. My home was large, expensive, and admired by many, but it was not a place of comfort. It was a place of fear. My husband's name was Lioness. To the world, he was perfect, successful, polite, respected. People often told me how lucky I was. They smiled at me with envy, not knowing that every smile I returned was practiced, rehearsed, and empty. Lioness controlled everything in that house. He controlled time, movement, silence, even my breath. Every day he looked at his watch the moment I stepped through the door. If I was 5 minutes late, just 5, his face would change. He never shouted. That would have been easier to bear. Instead, he stared at me with eyes so cold they made my skin crawl. Sometimes he leaned closer and smelled my clothes, slowly, carefully, as if searching for proof of betrayal. He believed I lived another life behind his back, even though my days were nothing more than work and home. I cooked his meals. I cleaned every room. I followed every rule. He never thanked me. He believed obedience was my duty. One evening, just a week before everything began to change, I forgot to buy his wine. It was his favorite brand. I arrived home on time, dinner ready, table set, but the wine was missing. Lioness said nothing. He ate in complete silence, never once lifting his eyes to meet mine. The quiet crushed me. It pressed against my chest until breathing felt painful. That silence stayed with me long after the plates were cleared. That night, lying awake beside him, I realized something frightening and honest. I needed somewhere to hide. I needed distance from that house, even if only for a few hours. That was how I started staying late at the office. Now, as I sat alone that evening, the building felt like a shelter. The lights buzzed softly overhead. I heard the distant sound of a printer and then noticed movement in the far corner of the room. A man sat at a desk near the window, his shoulders slumped, his face lit by the glow of his screen. His name was Mordaunt. He was new, around 40, quiet, working in a different department. I had seen him before, always polite, always distant. That night he did not pack his bag. He did not leave. I watched him for a moment longer than I meant to. His eyes looked tired, heavy with thoughts he did not want to carry home. In that instant, understanding passed between us without words. I was not the only one hiding. I was not the only one afraid of going home. The office felt less empty knowing that someone else shared this quiet escape. I turned back to my desk and opened a file, pretending to work. For the first time all day, I felt less alone. The days that followed settled into a strange routine. Mordaunt stayed late every night, and so did I. We both pretended to work, opening files that did not matter, rereading reports we already knew by heart. I typed emails and sent them to myself. He read the same pages again and again. We barely spoke. Sometimes our eyes met across the room, and we exchanged small nods or shy smiles. Questions hovered in my mind, but I did not ask them. He did not ask mine either. Silence became our agreement. 2 weeks passed like this, quiet and strange, yet comforting. The office turned into neutral ground, a place without judgment or demands. Then one Thursday night, everything shifted. Rain pounded against the windows, loud and relentless. Thunder cracked the sky open, and the building trembled slightly with each sound. Hunger twisted in my stomach. I walked to the coffee machine, pressed every button, waited, but nothing happened. It was broken. Exhaustion washed over me. I returned to my desk, dropped into my chair, and buried my face in my hands. Footsteps approached. I looked up to see Mordaunt standing beside my desk, holding 2 steaming cups. He placed one gently in front of me. Steam curled into the air between us. "Dinner for the busy ones," he said softly. His voice was calm, almost careful. I stared at the cup, at the simple kindness of it, and smiled. It was the first real smile I had felt in days. "Thank you," I said. He sat beside me, and we drank the instant coffee in silence, the warmth seeping into places I did not realize were cold. "You stay late every night," he said eventually. "Why don't you go home?" His question was gentle, not demanding. I hesitated, searching for a safe answer. "I can breathe better here," I said. He nodded as if that explained everything. "My ex-wife left me," he said quietly. "Now my house is too big. I hear my own footsteps, and I hate that sound." We understood each other then. No more words were needed. After that night, conversation came naturally. At 11 each night, we took breaks together, eating cheap noodles in the small kitchen. The food was bland, but laughter made it taste better than anything I cooked at home. Lioness always criticized my meals, but Mordaunt thanked me even when I did nothing at all. One night, he brought me tea without sugar. "You like it this way, right?" he asked. Something tightened in my chest. He remembered. Such a small thing, yet it felt enormous. We began turning off the overhead lights, leaving only our desk lamps glowing softly. Music played quietly from his phone. The office transformed into something warm and human. We talked about dreams we had buried. I told him about painting, how I once loved colors and canvases before Lioness called it useless. Mordaunt spoke of travel, of a world he had never seen. We were two people who had forgotten themselves. Yet every night I still went home. One night, Lioness waited for me in the dark living room. His questions were sharp, his suspicion thick. He searched my phone but found nothing. His touch made my skin crawl. Later, lying in bed, I thought of Mordaunt's quiet kindness and realized how empty my marriage truly was. One morning, after falling asleep at my desk, I woke to find Mordaunt's jacket draped over my shoulders. He had not touched me, yet that gesture held more care than a decade of marriage. I knew then that my life was shifting, slowly, painfully, towards something I could no longer stop. After the night I woke with Mordaunt's jacket resting on my shoulders, nothing felt the same again. The office was no longer just a place to hide. It had become a shelter where my heart could breathe. I returned the jacket to him that morning, and our eyes met for a moment longer than before. No words were spoken, yet everything was said. There was care, understanding, and something deeper that neither of us dared to name. We did not touch, we did not cross lines, but our souls had already stepped closer than our bodies ever did. Life outside the office, however, grew heavier. Lioness became quieter, and at first I thought this meant peace. I was wrong. His silence was not forgiveness, it was strategy. He stopped calling me every hour, stopped asking questions, stopped watching the clock so openly. That false calm frightened me more than his anger ever had. I knew Lioness well enough to understand that when he appeared gentle, he was preparing something cruel. Then one afternoon, my phone rang at work. It was my mother. Her voice was sharp, full of disappointment before I even spoke. She told me Lioness had called her, that he sounded worried and broken. He told her I was acting strangely, that I worked too much, that I came home late, that maybe I was seeing someone else. He painted himself as a loving husband, confused and afraid of losing his wife. My chest tightened as I listened. I tried to explain, but my mother did not hear me. She told me to stop embarrassing my husband, to be grateful, to return home early and behave like a proper wife. When she hung up, the silence around me felt louder than any scream. That night, I sat at my desk staring at nothing. Mordaunt noticed immediately. He did not ask questions. He simply pulled his chair closer and sat beside me. Outside, a storm had begun. Rain struck the windows violently, thunder shaking the building. The sky looked angry, just like the life I was trying to escape. I told him everything then, my voice low, trembling, but honest. I told him how Lioness threatened me, how he said no one would believe me, how he promised to destroy my life if I ever tried to leave. Mordaunt listened without interruption, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with anger that was not his own. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. "You don't deserve to live afraid." His words were simple, but they filled a hollow space inside me. That night, he held my hand as thunder crashed outside. His hand was warm, steady, real. For the first time in years, I felt protected. Our late nights became more careful after that. Security guards passed by more often, peering through glass doors. We learned to eat quietly under our desks, laughing like children hiding from the world. It was strange and sad and beautiful all at once. We were two broken people creating safety from nothing. One night, Mordaunt told me about his past in detail. His wife had betrayed him with his best friend, hiding the affair for years. When he discovered the truth, his life collapsed. Trust became impossible. I understood his pain deeply because betrayal wears many faces. I shared my fear with him, my belief that I was weak, that I could never escape Lioness. Mordaunt shook his head. "You're not weak," he said. "You've survived. That takes strength." Slowly, his words began to change something inside me. Fear still lived there, but courage began to grow beside it. Lioness, sensing my distance, tightened his grip in other ways. He contacted mutual friends, coworkers, relatives. He told them stories filled with concern and sadness. He spoke about my mental state, about how worried he was. People began to look at me differently, with pity, with suspicion. It was exactly as he had promised. The world began to doubt me before I ever spoke. One night, after a particularly heavy day, Mordaunt looked at me and said something that changed everything. "If you stay," he said, "you will disappear." His words were not dramatic. They were honest. "You don't have to leave tonight or tomorrow, but you need a plan. You need proof." His voice was steady, grounded. I realized then that hope without action was useless. That night, I did something I had never dared to do before. I recorded Lioness. I hid my phone and let him speak. I let him threaten me, mock me, promise to ruin me. He laughed as he said no one would ever believe me. I stood still, heart pounding, but I did not stop the recording. That small device captured my prison, my fear, my truth. I listened to it later with Mordaunt beside me. Hearing Lioness's voice outside of my body made me realize how cruel he truly was. It was no longer just my pain. It was evidence. The next weeks were filled with tension. Lioness grew restless. He followed me once, watched the office building from his car. I felt his presence even when I could not see him. Mordaunt noticed the fear in my eyes. He walked me to the elevator every night, waited until the doors closed. "You're not alone," he reminded me again and again. I held on to those words like a lifeline. Then came the night of the storm, the night everything collided. The rain was violent, relentless, mirroring the chaos inside me. I was terrified to go home. Mordaunt saw it immediately. He took my hand and said, "Stay. If you go back tonight, something inside you will die." I looked at him at the sincerity in his eyes, and something inside me finally broke free. "I want to leave," I whispered. "I don't know how, but I want to be free." Mordaunt promised he would help me no matter what. We packed our bags and left the office together earlier than usual, around 10. The elevator ride was quiet, heavy with anticipation. When the doors opened into the lobby, the bright lights shocked my eyes. Then I saw him. Lioness stood there, surrounded by my mother and family friends. My heart dropped. This was not coincidence. This was a trap. Lioness played his role perfectly, shouting, crying, accusing. My mother slapped me before I could speak. Shame burned through me, but beneath it, anger rose like fire. Mordaunt stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body. Lioness attacked him without hesitation. The fight was brutal, chaotic, filled with blood and screams. Security guards rushed in, pulling them apart. Lioness shouted threats, promising destruction. Something inside me snapped, but not in weakness, in strength. I took out my phone. I played the recording. Lioness's voice filled the lobby, raw and exposed. His threats echoed against the walls. Silence followed. His mask fell. The truth stood naked in front of everyone. I removed my wedding ring and threw it at his feet. The sound it made was small but final. I walked away without looking back, supporting Mordaunt as we stepped into the cold night air. Pain surrounded us, but freedom walked beside us. The world would not be kind after that. I knew it. But for the first time, I was not afraid. The night air felt sharp against my skin as Mordaunt and I stepped outside the building. Rain still clung to the ground, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like broken glass. My body ached. My face was swollen from my mother's slap, and Mordaunt's blood stained his shirt. Yet something inside me felt lighter than it had in years. We did not speak as we walked away. Words were unnecessary. The truth had already been spoken loudly enough inside that lobby. For the first time in a decade, I was not walking beside Lioness or behind him. I was walking forward, choosing my own direction. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Freedom did not arrive gently. It came with consequences, whispers, and storms of its own. Lioness did exactly what he promised. He called relatives, co-workers, old friends, telling his version of the story. He said I was unfaithful, unstable, ungrateful. He said Mordaunt had manipulated me. Some people believed him. Others stayed silent, afraid to take sides. I learned quickly that truth does not always win immediately, but lies eventually collapse under their own weight. What Lioness did not expect was the video. Someone in the lobby that night had recorded the fight. The footage spread faster than gossip ever could. People saw Lioness's rage, his violence, the way he attacked Mordaunt without hesitation. They saw the hatred on his face, the loss of control. Then the audio recording surfaced, my recording. His threats echoed across social media, stripped of context and excuses. His carefully built image shattered. His company suspended him first, then quietly let him go. Lawyers stopped returning his calls. The power he once held dissolved almost overnight. I moved out of the house we shared. I did not take much with me, only clothes, documents, and a few personal items. The walls of that house had absorbed too much fear to ever feel safe again. I stayed with a friend at first, sleeping on a small couch, waking in the middle of the night from old habits of fear. But slowly the silence became peaceful instead of threatening. No footsteps approached my door. No cold eyes watched me. I could breathe. My mother called me a week later. Her voice was broken, soaked in regret. She cried as she apologized, over and over. She told me she had watched the video, listened to the recording, and finally understood. I listened quietly. Forgiveness did not come instantly. Pain does not disappear just because someone says sorry. But hearing her admit she was wrong lifted another weight from my chest. I told her I needed time. She understood. Mordaunt recovered slowly. His injuries healed, leaving faint scars that told a story neither of us would ever forget. We spent time together, carefully, gently. There was no rush, no promises, no dramatic declarations. We had both been wounded by love before. What we shared now was built on patience and respect. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we sat in silence, comfortable and calm. The office that once hid us was now just a building again. We no longer needed to hide. I started painting again. At first, my hands trembled as I held the brush. Colors felt unfamiliar, like meeting an old friend after many years apart. But slowly, confidence returned. I painted pain, fear, and finally, light. Each canvas became a small act of rebellion, proof that Lioness had not erased me completely. Mordaunt encouraged me quietly, never pushing, never judging. He simply believed in me. Life did not become perfect. Some nights, memories returned uninvited. I woke up afraid, heart racing, expecting Lioness's voice in the dark. Healing was not a straight line, but every morning I reminded myself of the woman who stood in that lobby, who pressed play without shaking, who threw her wedding ring to the floor and walked away. That woman lived inside me now, stronger each day. Lioness tried to contact me once more through a lawyer. I refused to respond. Silence was my final boundary. He no longer controlled my time, my voice, or my future. The fear he planted in me for years had lost its power. I saw now that his greatest weapon had always been my belief that I was alone. I was not. Months later, I stood in a small gallery, my paintings displayed on white walls. Friends stood beside me. My mother held my hand. Mordaunt watched me from across the room, pride in his eyes. As people admired my work, I realized something profound. My story was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming myself. That night, as I locked my apartment door, I felt safe, truly safe. I made tea without sugar and smiled at the small detail. The city hummed outside, alive and open. My future was uncertain, but it was mine, and that was enough.